All right, we're not going to have any slides tonight. We don't have a lot of scriptures that we're going to be looking at, but have your Bibles with you. If you would, turn over to Daniel chapter 10. This is the final lesson for our spiritual warfare that we've been looking at. And just to let you know where we're going to go from this point, I was going through the questions again last week and trying to see where to go, and I'm thinking, well, we did believing in God and combating some of those things, the truth of the Bible. We talked about angels and demons. We talked about Satan. Well, there was another question in there. What does the Bible say about hell? So, of course, if we're going to go there, I figured we might as well talk about what the Bible says about heaven as well. But we'll split them up and we'll look at them separately in the first of the year when we come back, because we won't have a class next Sunday. But that's where we're going to be going. And I want you to keep in mind as we are looking at this passage, okay? I want you to think about what we have been talking about. Think about the armor of God. You know, what do those tools help us with? We need to remember that it's not a physical battle. It's not something that we're going to be fighting with our physical bodies. It's a spiritual. It's something internal. And when you look at the passage in Daniel chapter 10, what we see something happen in that story. And we've read it already recently. But what we got is... we have the discussion there in Daniel chapter... Why can I not... I swear these are wrong. My eyes don't work. One or the other, or I forget how to use a Bible because I always use my phone. But that's not right. All right, Daniel chapter 10. There we go. Daniel chapter 10. What's that? Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, that's always the fun one, right? Where's all that stuff at? Yeah, I know. And I just went past Hosea. I don't know. It's enough pages that I wouldn't think it would be that difficult for me to find. But, you know, it's almost like I've never been to the book of Daniel ever before in my life. But I will tell you, though, you do lose your memory on the pages when you're using technology. I mean, I want to make a comparison. How many phone numbers do you know right now? For our people that are at least in my age group and lower, how many phone numbers did you have memorized when you were a kid? I mean, I still remember a few of them. A couple that I called all the time, friends, or a home number. But, I mean, you would just pick the phone up, and it wasn't, got to go through my contact list and find. I mean, you just picked it up and just started dialing. Dialing, right? But at least we're not doing a rotary, right? But it's true, you know, you do those type. I mean, it's very easy to go down the screen and pick something, or just type it in on the Bible Gateway and it comes up, and you're not doing anything wrong there, but it is a thing to be in the Bible itself. All right, let's take a look at Daniel chapter 10. And to kind of lay the groundwork here, first off, pretty much, I think it's chapter 8 on. They're all kind of connected. In the first couple chapters there, Daniel's given a vision that he doesn't understand. Well, he doesn't understand it, so what's he do? He prays to God. And that's when we see taking place. Now, does anyone here think that if God has a plan, there's nobody that can stop it? If God has a plan, it's going to happen. But it's not going to happen in a way where he's puppeteering us and making somebody. Now, there may be things that God does. Now, I want you to, let's go back a little further in the Old Testament just for a moment and think of Pharaoh. It's said in there that God hardened his heart. I had a hard time with that for a long time because I thought, how could God harden somebody? You know, how could God take something but then I had to look at it and realize what it was really talking about. It was the things that God has set in place, and he's saying, this is the way these are. You have the opportunity to accept them. And then he began to send the plagues because he wouldn't accept. And all of those things continue to, and you got to look at his perspective. Pharaoh, in a sense, was treated, or at least probably whispered in his ear, that he was a god. That's the kind of the mentality the pharaohs had. So you see that, but God didn't go to Pharaoh and say, I really need you to not let my people go. And since you're not going to, I'm going to make you mad. That would be completely against what God is. God gave Pharaoh did God start attacking first? Or did God send his spokesman in to talk and to try? Was God even asking? Or God was, but was the question that he asked at first even, we're going to leave and never come back? When he went to the Pharaoh and he said, weren't they just wanted to go and sacrifice and have a kind of a time. So it wasn't even saying, we want to leave. But it became that, obviously. We knew that's where it was going. But I just want you to think about that. God's not sitting up in heaven going, okay, we're going to change his emotions. We're going to make him angry today. We're going to make him happy. That would be against free will. So we need to understand that free will comes into place in situations such as this. Now, for instance, if God gives us free will, God's not going to make somebody in this world do something in the physical realm that they didn't choose to do. Judgment will come later. But let's take a look at the lesson here and listen to this here. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long. And he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all. 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. Now, on the 24th day of the 1st month. Now, we see here, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold and upas. His body was like beryl. His face was like an appearance of lightning. His eyes like torches of fire. His arms and his feet like burnished bronze in color. And the sound of his word like the voice of a multitude. All right, we'll stop right there. We'll continue reading on here a little bit more. But I want you to look at that here. This is a pretty fantastic looking person. I mean, as far as something that would stand out. If you were walking down the street and you saw someone with flaming eyes, would you notice that? You think if you just walk past them, not even really paying attention, you would see it. I mean, it would be something that would be different, it would be bright, it would be, So what we have here is we have this angel, he comes, and Daniel has been praying for 24 days. Fasting, in a sense. Not a complete fast where he's not eating at all, but he has gotten rid of meats and really delectable things that are, he's putting aside. But so he's weak at this point too. First off, who is the vision talking about? Does anyone know? This fiery eyes. Maybe we don't know. Or maybe we can take a guess. And there's some things in there that maybe could point to something. Is it an angel? Oh, we don't know what we want to answer here, do we? Well, that was more his servants that were with him too. That they kind of just ran off. We don't even know exactly what they saw because it said they didn't even see the vision, but something happened. My understanding of this has always been, I always believed and thought that, maybe it wasn't a named angel that we have. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was Gabriel. We know Michael is mentioned that he, in the later verses here, that he's involved too. Some will even say that they think that this is a vision of Jesus. Not far-fetched. the angel of the Lord. I would have no problem if somebody said in many of the times where we see the angel of the Lord and we see that this is God. This isn't just an angel giving a message. This is God speaking. And I have no issue with someone believing because Jesus was there. And he could have been there. Now, what I'm going to get at is basically we don't know exactly what this vision, this person is. We know it's a entity from heaven. We know it's someone on God's side. More than likely it's bringing a message, so it's an angel. It's a messenger. But was it Michael? Was it Gabriel? Because Michael is still in Persia. I'm not 100% sure. But this is most definitely an angelic experience that we see here. That this is definitely, a message from God. Eric?
Is it really important who that person is? Because he's delivering the message.
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether it's Jesus or whoever, an angel with a name you can't pronounce,
Right.
he's still there to present the message.
Yeah, and with what Eric said, go look up and ask your Google or ask whoever you want on your phone and ask them how many angels are named in the Bible. Their answers are not right. I think the highest amount that I got on the very first screen was 5 names. And I thought, I've never seen it. Now, there were some names that when I read through them, I'm like, okay, I've heard people reference or use this name and whatnot. But there's only 2 angels named in the Bible. We know that there is legions of angels. So the fact that Gabriel and Michael are the only 2 that are mentioned, let's see, another one of the ones that was on there was Raphael. I think that one came from some type of, they claim it being a Hebrew text of some sort that someone had written. Not a Bible, not, it was just, beliefs coming from that perspective. But as far as the Bible goes, we have no reference of anyone else. Now, with what Eric said, does it matter who the message is? In the context of the actual story, he's right. It doesn't matter. But in the discussion of looking at what we're going to be looking at, the idea that this angel was held up by someone, so that's kind of the idea that I kind of look at. But I also see this is a really great description, and a lot of people will make comparison to Revelation chapter 1. If you look at the description that's given in, say it's about, I think it starts around 5, 6, or 7, the description of Jesus. These trumpets show up, these scrolls show up, and then Jesus is there, and then he has the fiery eyes, and it's very, very reminiscent of a description that we see here in Daniel. The comparison is and I think that's why a lot of people will say that this is Jesus. I don't have an issue with that. Just like I said, I couldn't tell you who exactly. I couldn't tell you if it was an angel with no name or an angel with 3 names or if it was Jesus himself. We do know it's a message from God. That's the most important thing. But going into a little bit further here, verse 7. Oh, yeah. Exactly. That's where we're going to go next. Yeah. That's the part that throws what Brent had just said. As we read a little bit further here, why would it be that God, Jesus, was held up? Now, I would say this, though. We got to remember that even God doesn't force people to listen. But I doubt it. I'm with him. I don't think that this is a representation, this one, of Jesus. But like I said, it's not an argument that I think is worthwhile. Verse 7, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone when I saw the great vision. And no strength remained in me, for my vigor was turned to frailty. And I retained no strength, yet I heard the sound of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you. And stand upright, for I I have now been sent to you. While he was speaking these words to me, I stood trembling. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from this first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourselves before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had left alone there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come. All right, now another thing that I also want to talk about before we go much further is, does anyone have any idea historically what might have been happening in the courts of the Persians at this time, biblically saying? All right, well, I assumed that would be the response, because this is not something that normally people know unless they're teaching a class. Or the Samaritans actually were hanging out in the Persian court, bad-talking the Jewish people. Now remember, the Jews are where? They're in Babylon, aren't they? At this point, they still are. Daniel never goes home. We know Nehemiah and them later on do, not too far down the road from this. But what you see here is you have Samaritans who are in the court of the Persians whispering in their ears, trying to say, oh, you don't want to. I don't know, maybe it was kind of like the tactics that maybe that horrible Adolf Hitler did, where he started to say little things about the Jews, things that at first it was like, well, that's not really that big of a deal. But then they kept growing and growing. And really all they were trying to do was just reform the minds of the people to make them think. I mean, you think about it. There have been numerous things in the world that we have been afraid of, that later on we look back and go, why was I so fearful there? But it was because we didn't understand. So we do see here, first off, how can somebody hold an angel of the Lord back? What do you picture there? Are you picturing a battle, a fight? I don't necessarily picture that. I picture the idea, and this may be silly, but I mention it all the time, but that idea of the devil and the angel on your shoulders. I think the good angel, the good angels are here in this situation, and they're trying to promote ideas in the Persians about the Jews. Because guess what? They're coming home. No matter what. That's God's plan. That's what's going to happen. So what we do is, and I think some of that comes down to this, is it's not so much, because this verse almost makes, I don't know, to me, it almost makes God's angels seem weaker than they are. And I think this is the view the world has of this mighty war that's going to happen, Armageddon in the end, and all the angels are going to fight against each other. I don't see that, because God's too powerful. And I don't think anyone could hold an angel back if God wanted them to move forward. Now, we may look at 24 days and say, that's a long time, right? Is that a long time in spiritual things? In heaven? Is there time? I mean, I don't know how it's going to be. I mean, when we're in heaven, let's say we're in heaven and we're there for 1,000 years, we're probably going to have really no concept to even care about the time period, because it's not going to end. It's just always. But one of the things that we also see in here is that Daniel is very distressed at this point. He hears this vision and he sees things that are coming, but he doesn't quite understand everything. And this angel comes. But there's something else I think we can get from this. Why would God make Daniel wait? Or why would God let the situation be that way that he had to wait? Daniel was suffering. I'm looking from the human perspective, not necessarily the right perspective, but that's what we think. Daniel's suffering. Why not take that suffering away? But that's what I'm trying to get at, is there's so much out there around us that's so much bigger than just us or just me, just the one person. And there are things that are happening out there. Now, I personally don't believe that demon possession even happens still today. And I think the scriptures tell us that. I think that was something, as Jesus said, a lot of the miracles, those things were set up. People were given things so that they could be examples or were let to have those things. But I don't think today that we have to worry about a demon taking us over and us not having any control. Now, with that being said, I do think we can give ourselves over to Satan. Now, there's a difference. I'm not talking about a possession where we're being forced to do something against our will. I'm talking about giving in and saying, this is what I want. This is what I desire. This is how I'm going to live. Yes, Eric.
You said that certainly when you teach, you don't always tell students everything. You throw things out, ask the question, leave there, let them figure it out, or come up with something they think are answers, or you give them the final word. And even Jesus hinted at certain things without plainly saying what was going to happen. Early on.
Right.
So he's like planting some seeds for people to be thinking about without just giving simply just giving every person information over.
Right.
But so you just get them thinking, and then you kind of throw out the misconception later on.
Yeah.
So maybe Daniel could learn thinking.
Contemplate, yeah, maybe it was something he needed at that moment. I mean, absolutely. Why do you think that is such a good tool? To not just throw all the information out. What does that do for the student themselves? They have to investigate, right? They have to look for things. Now, it's not that they'll never ever have the teacher give them the answer, but it's the idea that if I'm going to send you out with a little bit of information, but your mind is set on learning more, you're going to want to know more. You're going to want to read more books. You're going to want to do more problems, whatever it may be. Yeah. Yeah. Has anyone here ever sat in a lecture that was really boring? You needed to take it because it was a required class or whatever it may be, but it was the worst class you ever took in your life. There was nothing in that class that you enjoyed. We'll go against our math professors. Maybe it was math because you struggle with it so much and you have so much problems with it. I'm sure Eric and Jamel could probably attest to many students struggling with that kind of thing. But it could be anything. I mean, you stop and you think, go back to, I remember in middle school, we had the option to, we could pick in the very beginning, we had to take home ec and we had to take shop class. Those were like, but then the following year, that was our way. Now, which one did you like better? Because now when you're in the 8th grade, you got to pick. So if you wanted to just do shop, that's what you did. But what it was all about was getting to know what it was. And you know what? There were some people that you would be surprised. Believe it or not, I actually enjoyed home ec class, probably because we got to eat. But I enjoyed it. It was something that I liked. But what I'm trying to get at is God does want us to, sometimes it's our duty to sit and meditate. The answer may not be something that we need right now. Maybe the idea of getting to the answer is what we need and what we need to learn. Have you ever had somebody ask you a question biblically that you could not answer right away? Sure, we all have. I mean, if you've been in conversations with people about the Bible, have you ever been in a conversation with someone where you knew they didn't want to hear your truth and they just wanted to drag you down? It didn't matter. You may start talking to them, but eventually you realize, okay, if you just want to argue, then it's not worth it. When you want to talk about it, we'll come back to it. But sometimes that's what is needed, us to approach things differently. Have you ever done something hard in life that you did not want to do that afterwards you were happy you did? Something that you had to push yourself a little bit more. You know, like if somebody told me to go practice and be prepared for a marathon, I would laugh and say, I'm not going to run that. But, you know, that's what it comes down to is, you know, but here he is. He's struggling with this. And we also see that there's been some time that has gone by. I don't think the time necessarily means anything because God doesn't run off of that clock. But we're looking at physical lives that are living this way. I would say probably the times that I've ever had opportunities or times where I had despair about understanding something in the Bible, to me, it's always been at times when there was someone else that I knew needed the answer. You know, I think it was because, you know, my faith was there. I believed in the Word, and I trusted it, but someone would ask me a question that I didn't have the answer for, but I knew they needed it. Like it was something they were serious about. And, you know, you want to find that answer and give them comfort and help them along their way. But that happens, and here Daniel is in that same position. But when we look at these characters here that we're looking at, I cannot see, or I cannot not, double negative there, see that that there is not actual negative spiritual beings working against us. I see that. It's just that possession thing that I don't believe happens anymore. But I think they're out there working behind the scenes. Satan wants to bring as many of us down as he can. He wants us to go with him and sink with the ship. All right. What would you say? See, my thought is, you know, we have these angels working behind the lines, in a sense. We don't necessarily see them. I don't even know exactly how they do it. You know, how do they try to encourage people without speaking to them? You know, but it's something that we do have to think about and really, in a sense, worry about, because we need to be prepared for whatever is going to come our way. But I do not believe that, let him be Gabriel, let him be another angel, but I do not believe that he was sitting in Persia in a wrestling position with another angel and it couldn't move. That's not it. I think it's God trying to work through the physical, and there's negative coming at him, or at us as well, but it's not, you know, like we picture it, a war and, you know, swords and knives and guns and, yes, Cindy. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, we wouldn't be able to fit 1,000 people in this auditorium, but God could literally have 1,000 angels in here, and he could make it work. I mean, but it's true. I don't know how angels are working exactly today, because the gospel is in our hands. So the message from God is already here. He doesn't have to work that way anymore. But I don't think angels are sitting on their thumbs, you know, not doing anything. They're still working for God. And really, I wish I could give you a play-by-play 100% exactly on every one of these things that we've talked about. But it's spiritual and physical, and it's a hard contrast, I guess, to compare, because they're so different. But yet, we are both physical and spiritual. And because of that, we are constantly in a battle, in a fight, to stay righteous, to serve God. And that's what our spiritual warfare is. You know, it's not as the world would put it, magic spells and sorcery, and you know, you got to read the right verse when the demon's in your room, or you got to say the right thing. You know, I don't see any of those things happening, and I'm looking at the Bible. So spiritual warfare is not something to shrug off and to say, oh, it's no big deal. It's your spiritual life. It's a very big deal. How do we stay right with God? How do we train? I think that's the most important thing. Really, if you think about someone in the military that wears a uniform that has these weapons that we discussed, they train with them. You know, if you've ever seen, I know the Romans, they used to have those like really nice looking wooden swords I've seen in movies that I don't know if they really did this historically or not, but they would have wooden swords that were the same shape as their sword, and they would practice and practice. And have you ever slid on ice in your car? Are you the type of person that freaks out when you start sliding, or are you the type of person that automatically just starts working on the problem? I know there's some that's what it'll be. It starts to happen. They're scared. They don't know what to do. Okay, a little bit of both. Sure. That's one thing that I've noticed about myself, that, you know, I've been driving for so many years. I mean, many here would, but I mean, I did jobs where I drove all day long, and I mean, it doesn't make me a better driver, but there are times like I'll slide on the ice and I don't even think about it. My hand just starts moving. You don't even think, okay, I got to do this. You're already conformed to it. You're already prepared, even though you weren't prepared necessarily. And to me, that's the same thing. We have to exercise with our weapon. Meditating on the word. Think about the lesson that we talked about this morning with Joshua. Staying courageous and strong, meditating on the word, you know, applying it also. Spiritual warfare is not something to joke around about, because it's something we're engaged in every day. Spiritual warfare is not something, well, every 6 months I got to go to war. You know, or for the next 4 years, you know, I'm going to be on tour over, you know, in Afghanistan or wherever, you know, our military, that's how they will do it. They'll send them out on different times. Our battle doesn't end until the Lord comes back. So it's a fight every day. I think Nate was saying this morning, that basically we don't need anyone else to help us screw up. We do that just fine on our own. You know, you get alone by yourself for a little bit, and your own thoughts, and automatically, you know, that's the devil. That's Satan working in your mind and trying to knock you down, trying to bring you away from serving God. And really, in a sense, it's because he wants the power. He wants to be worshipped. That's why he was, in essence, thrown out. All right, any other questions or comments? I think I have given you all the information I have at this point. But if there's no other questions or comments, we'll go ahead and finish up here this evening. But remember, we're going to go, and I'm going to look at the negative side first, because that was the question. Looking at the scriptures and what God says about hell, and, you know, the reality of it. It is something good to study, because there are people in this world that will tell you it doesn't exist. They'll tell you there's only a heaven. And then there will be others that say there's no heaven or hell. And we got to worry about them because they don't know the word. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. We'll bring the invitation here. If there's anyone that has come to that realization that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and you want to be baptized into Jesus, we give you that opportunity. Or maybe you just need some prayers of encouragement. If you have any need, come forward as we stand and sing this song.
When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, the time shall be no more, and the morning breaks eternal.